Well, as most actresses, I think, since I was a child. When I was a child, I was a very outgoing. I was the apple of my parents' eye. I was a daddy's girl. I would sing and dance for them and their friends, and that's how. And I don't think you know it, but I was a recording artist when I was 14 years old. And Glenn Campbell played guitar for me. I had the #2 record regionally called Heaven and Paradise. And then I had another record called Dear Santa, Send Me a Boy. Johnny Rivers sang background for me. PJ Proby, who was then Jet Powers, who later became the infamous PJ Proby, sang falsetto in the group. And it became #2. Heaven and Paradise, look it up. Threesome was an amazing experience. It was a very controversial film. It was, I had nude scenes and I had a lesbian scene, which was in 1969 shocking because it was not a porno film or anything. It was a Danish co-production. I was under contract to Universal. They suspended me for doing that film. It was about a woman who, if I can remember, is in Denmark and falls in love with another woman and then becomes mentally ill over it and ends up in an institution. So it was sensational, but it was really a good film. I mean, it was considered sensational in those days. It made headlines. It opened at the Hollywood Pantages, and I was doubled in certain scenes, and they spiced it up even more. And we put an injunction against the film, and I had a disclaimer at the end of the film saying that I had been doubled. They doubled me and didn't tell me, and added a masturbation scene that wasn't me. And my main objection was that no one told me. I mean, if I'm going to have to do something, if that's my decision to do something like that, then I should do it the way I want to do it, and not in such a subversive way. And that was, it was horrible. I mean, that was just really awful. That was my very first film. I was in almost every frame of that film, and I worked very hard and took it very seriously. The movie company, actually, that I was working for would have loved me to sue them. They wanted me to. They wanted the publicity, and they did everything they could to get me to sue them so that they could use it. You know, I was in an acting group with David and Keith and Barbara Hershey and myself and Michelle Phillips. Sharon Tate was in it. We were pretty innocent, actually, I think, in those days. There were less of us than there are of them. There were 3 networks. That's it. There was ABC, NBC, CBS, a handful of studios, and a couple of independents, maybe AIP and New World.
Women in Cages, the sensational new motion picture that rips the veil off the dirtiest racket ever conceived by the minds of vicious men.
Interestingly enough, my reservation was, someday I'm going to have a daughter. Maybe what if I have children and they see this? Sure enough, and this, skipping forward now, sure enough, my daughter was going to George Washington University and her boyfriend was in a fraternity, and they called me because they did not believe it was her mother, my daughter's mother. And they called and said, that was really you. I knew this was going to happen to my poor daughter, but she was great about it. The guys from the fraternity house were great. They were just thrilled. I don't know if Bobby ever told you this, but they were filming. We were out there. We used to have to drive like 4 hours out of Manila to go into the jungle, one way. So like we were in a car for 8 hours, you know. And we got to the location, and the rest of the cast and crew were filming like over a hillside, and Bobby and I found a swimming hole. This is true. And we took off our clothes and jumped in just the two of us, into this swimming hole. We weren't going to be needed on the set or anything for a while, so it was really hot. You know, it was really hot and muggy in the Philippines, in the jungles. And so we did, and all of a sudden I looked over and I said, Bobby, we are not alone. And I looked over and there were little heads peeking out of they weren't little heads, but they looked like little heads at the time, peeking out from the rocks. And before I knew it, there was like a whole tribe of jungle, what they called mountain men, who jumped into the swimming hole with us. You know, and they started approaching us, and we started screaming, and we screamed so loud that they stopped the production over on the other side of the hill, and the crew came running. And when the crew came running, these mountain men jumped out and ran away, never to be seen again, but they came way too close and were grabbing at us. And you know, that's just a real typical sort of story on when you're young and naive and think you have the world by the tail, how close you can come to something that could have been serious that we never even considered.
Starring Judy Brown, Pam Grier, Roberta Collins, Jennifer Gann, and many, many others. Innocent young girls held in cruel bondage.
I didn't see it that way. I saw it almost the opposite. I never saw it that way. I saw it that it was putting women in men's situations, and we were the ones to break out of the prisons, and we were the tough ones, and we were the ones who tied up the men and put them back in the prisons. And I thought that was pretty cool.
You'll meet them all in Women in Cages.